Good evening, everybody. Boy, there must be something special going on tonight. We're an awfully full house. This is wonderful. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to see so many people. We always have a good crowd, but this is really a good crowd. So thanks for braving the cold, for coming out tonight. I think you're going to get your money's worth. I'm Lorraine Zamora, by the way, president of 3 Parks. And tonight's meeting is the third in a series of club meetings, folks, in which we hear from local candidates running for office and to vote for endorsement. At our December meeting, we heard from Alvin Bragg, who's running for DA again. At our meeting 2 weeks ago, January 8th, we heard from candidates running for city council and public advocate. Tonight, we're hearing from candidates for mayor. As far as I know, there will be 7. On February 12th, we'll be hearing from candidates for New York City Controller and Manhattan Borough President. And on February 19th, the last of our candidate for endorsement meetings, we will be hearing from candidates for district leaders, judges, if there are any, and judicial delegates. So I'm going to be turning the meeting over to our district leaders, Teresa Cantor and Dan Cohen. But before I do that, I would like to introduce Danielle Gerard, and she's going to, we e-blasted it, but she's going to read a resolution that needs to be voted on.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you all so much for coming. Look at this crowd. Give yourselves a round of applause, please. Please, for all the work you did at the storefront, for everything you're doing here, for everything you do to make 3 Parks the best club in the universe. Now I'm going to read my resolution. Our resolution, which the board passed, we have added a word, which I will put in at the end. It does not change the tenor, but here we go. I hope you all had a chance to read the newsletter article that briefly outlines the danger coming right at us. Whereas the new administration has promised to begin mass deportations on day 1, whereas there are approximately 500,000 new New Yorkers under threat, as well as others who have lived here for years, whereas nearly all Americans are descended from immigrants, whereas we need all immigrants to be authorized to work as quickly as possible to pay taxes and support vital social programs, whereas the New York economy is dependent on immigrants who work in technology, medicine, agriculture, home health and child care, hospitality, and construction, and whereas New York's sanctuary laws are at risk from both the Trump and Adams administrations, therefore, be it resolved that 3 Parks Independent Democrats supports all peaceful efforts to fight federal, state, and local attempts to deport new New Yorkers and longtime documented and undocumented members of our communities. Okay, so can I have a motion to adopt the resolution? I probably should have explained first that the reason we do resolutions on particular issues is to enable the club to work on those issues, the Xeroxing, the tabling, the having rallies, whatever it is we do, has to be approved by the membership before we do it. We are a bottom-up club, not a top-down club. You all get to help decide what we work on. In any event, may I please have a motion to vote? Thank you. A second. So moved. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle. 2 things. If we need more chairs, I think we can probably use these three because I don't think any of the... Oh, there's more over here. If we need more chairs, there are things over here. Thank you. I always think I am and I'm not. Is this better? Okay. Before I bring on Teresa, there is one thing. I have been asked by Michael Lasher, you know who he is, our assembly person that we voted into office. Michael Lasher is being sworn in on Thursday, February 13th at the Booker T. Washington Middle School. Is that where you went, Steve? Yeah. Steve went there. So he knows the way. Anyway, Micah has invited everybody at Three Parks, we're his favorite club, at everybody at Three Parks to come to his swearing-in ceremony Thursday, February 13th, 6 o'clock, at the Booker T. Washington School. That's 108th between Amsterdam and Columbus. And we will get this information out to you. We're all invited. He's serious. He said, he sent me a message saying, I would be grateful if you could circulate this to the membership of Three Parks, and I hope a lot of you come, okay? And I think with that, I'm introducing Teresa Cantor, our district leader, who really has organized all of the endorsement meetings and scheduled all of the candidates who have come here to speak. And tonight is a doozy, let me tell you, because there are so many speakers, and she's done a terrific job. So, Teresa, it's all yours. And Dan Cohen is going to help.
Yes, thank you. And it was certainly done with the help of my co-leader, Dan Cohen. So again, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. We really appreciate your turning out on such a cold and chilly night. But I think it'll be well worth it. We are going to have 7 candidates to speak to you tonight. And our first candidate is Reverend Michael Blake, and he is here. Now, he is a former assembly member from the Bronx. So, let's introduce, first, before we start, I do want to say that every candidate has a max of 15 minutes on the floor, okay? We have asked everyone to spend 5 to 7 minutes on their opening statement. Did I lose the sound? On the opening statement, and the rest of the time will be devoted to Q&A from the floor, okay? And those will be the rules for all 7 candidates. Do you have anything to add?
I just want to acknowledge that we're joined by former District Leader Bob Botchfeld, and thank you so much for coming. Good to see you. Thank you. Okay, shall we begin? Assemblyman Reverend Michael Blake, please join us. Thank you for coming.
Good evening. Good evening. It's good to see everybody. Hope you're doing well. How are we doing this evening? Cold, right? Cold. For those that I'm meeting for the first time, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you. My name is Michael Blake. I served as an assembly member for 6 years in the South Bronx and as vice chair for 4 years, and I'm a candidate for mayor. We are specifically doing this because, candidly, we are spending too much, we're getting back too little, and we deserve better here in the city. We have to be much more focused on what is going on around cost of living, affordability, and our public services. When we think about what we could be in the city right now, we're not getting what we deserve. When we think about the opportunities, first and foremost, I do believe there should be a new vision of a Mitchell-Lama 2.0, so we can actually have middle-class and working-class housing in New York City again. I was the Mitchell-Lama chair, so that is very personal to me. I think we have to give a new imagination for our students And I do believe if you give me the chance to be mayor, that every student should graduate and have completed civics, financial literacy, and mental health. Because if you do that, you can transform the community for a student. I was that young kid who was at PS 79, 118, dealing with Clinton High School. I went to public schools K through 12, so it's very personal to me. We do believe that there should be universal child care, because if you do that, you can change the game and the primary cost that's happening on our families right now. But then we have to go a step further. When we think about what's happened in the last few days, it is the latest reminder of why we're running. I had the opportunity to be an assembly member. I also worked for President Obama for 6.5 years. And we need to have someone who understands what is happening in the city, in the state, and in the federal dynamics. We shouldn't have someone that's going to D.C. for a pardon. We should have someone that's here that's actually fighting for the people. And so when we think about that, there is an opportunity that exists in what we would like to do. We can transform what's happening here. We can have safety in our communities. We should not still have homelessness in New York City. We have unused space where those that are homeless right now, which is personal for me. My mom was homeless in Jamaica. We slept on church pews in that dynamic. We don't have to have homelessness, and we don't have to have poverty in this city any longer if we are serious about actually helping our communities to get jobs and higher wages. It's also taken a step further that you can and you should be able to say that I'm a man and a feminist at the same time. That we are going to make sure we're standing up for reproductive justice across what's happening in our city and actually collaborating in a sensible way. Going a step further, we have to think about practical ways to make sure that our trains are running on time and our trains are clean and safe, as well as addressing the mental health concerns that are happening in our city at the same time. We can actually provide more support to all of us across this community. And when you think about that, how do we do that? We need to reimburse nonprofits faster. It doesn't make any sense that a nonprofit is doing the work and is being told that you're going to wait 6 to 8 months to be paid back. It doesn't make any logical sense. I would never say to any one of you, you know what, work for 2-3 months and then I'll pay you down the line. You would not continue to do that work at all. And so when we think about what is possible in the city, it's the opportunity to transform our city, to say that our city, our home, our dreams deserve better. It does not make sense that we are spending so much and getting back so little. We equally have to find ways to be attentive to bring back people into our communities. Those that have been college graduates who have left, we all know someone who right now is working in the city, but they may be living in Connecticut or New Jersey because they don't think they can pay what's happening here. Let's find ways to have tax incentives to bring people back home into our New York communities, as well as encourage for our business to hire communities as well, so we can make sure it's changing that regard. I have done that work for 6 years in the Assembly. We did that for 4 years nationally, and now we would ask for the opportunity to do it across our city. You have many incredible candidates here, and that is no question about that. When we think about what's happening around ranked choice voting, you have the opportunity to transform what is happening for our city for the better. And so I close with this before taking any and all questions. First, I want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to be in the room, and thank you for inviting us to be in the room. Second, we have an opportunity to change what is happening here. And as the only person who has federal, state, and city experience, what we are seeing right now will have a tax on our city. When we think about, you can have public safety, public housing, public schools, and public health all work at the same time. You can have affordable housing that's working in our communities for our middle-class communities at the same time. We can focus on expanding what's happening around healthcare, in which you are a champion around that, and figuring out ways, not just for single payer, but expanding out as well. That is the vision of what we can have. But lastly, a mayor is someone who can manage, someone who can actually demonstrate that you can lead a city in this enterprise. I have led 3 small businesses as well as a national democracy project. And as we are on the front to fight for our communities, that is the opportunities we present to you. So again, my name is Michael Blake. Let me do 2 quick things before taking any questions. Everyone just do like this right here. Everybody just do like this right here. All right, just trust me. Do like that. Do like that. All right, I just shook everybody's hand. So we just got that right there. We were able to address that there. Second, I want everybody, just take out your cell phones, please, if you can. Just take out your cell phones so that you can be able to just be aware for follow-up. Again, as I said, my name is Michael Blake. The website is blake4nyc.com. Blake, FORNYC.com. So that you can be aware of how to follow up with us afterwards in what we are doing right now. Let me pause right there because I know it's time for questions. Again, my name is Michael Blake. I will ask for your consideration and your vote to be the next mayor of New York City. Thank you, everybody.
Hi. Climate change continues to threaten the lives of current and future generations. What are you going to do to make New York City more sustainable? And specifically, what are you going to do to protect Local Law 97?
I was a co-sponsor. No, I'm just playing right there. I was a co-sponsor in the bill in Albany around how we have the greater expansion when it came to the environment, because we're not treating climate change as the crisis as we need to. I was a policy director for Green for All in that same regard. When we think about what's happening, not just with our water, but what's happening with our breathing and what's happening in our communities, we can transform this in a practical way. The necessity of protecting the local law is essential because we have to think about more practical ways. For example, the emissions. Too often the conversation around emissions is just happening around vehicles and buses, and people are not thinking about the emission that's happening around with buildings and being more attentive around that. And what is happening and being sent out to our communities is truly damaging. We need to be more attentive of anticipating the weather crises that are happening over and over again. We did not effectively prepare what happened with Superstorm Sandy and the response with that. And therefore, what happened is that we didn't then assess the actual infrastructure that has to be changed across the city. There should not consistently be flooding that is happening in our city. There cannot be consistently problems that are happening. It's because people have not invested in the infrastructure to address what's happening with them with climate change. And so giving those as concrete examples, first of all, we have to be much more attentive of our long-term planning. We know that crises will happen. We know that rain and snow will happen. Why are we consistently surprised? We're being surprised because we're not having effective management in the city right now. We have people that are spending more time that are trying to kiss the ring of Donald Trump rather than make sure that our city is running right on time. And so when we think about that, we got to be very practical in what this could be. Taking a step further, we know our cities and our communities are getting warmer. We understand that and we're seeing that, but we're also seeing greater depth when it comes to what's happening with being too cold. And so the protections that can happen around not just what's going on with local laws, but collaborations with the state and the federal laws as well will make us stronger and more impactful. Lastly, there is a tremendous opportunity on climate jobs that we don't think about enough. We don't recognize that we see in other places, such as outside of Massachusetts, with wind turbines, where they are building a new generation of what's happening for our communities to not only make it safer and make it more environmentally friendly, but long-term, high-pay, high-wages jobs as well. We can do all three at the same time if we have that serious approach around the urgency around climate change.
Hi. Immigration. What actions will you take against or to oppose the current administration's nefarious plans for the people who live in this city?
Absolutely. As a son of immigrants myself, it is absolutely reprehensible and inhumane what Donald Trump and their team are proposing and looking to move forward with. They are seeking to divide us and dehumanize who we are as a people. And practically, we have to think about not just the ramifications of what it means from a humane standpoint, but the daily ramifications of that. So if you attack street vendors, for example, what happens to those communities and the e-commerce that happens from that? What happens for the family member of that mother and that parent who is wondering, do I walk my child to school because I'm afraid of ICE agents showing up? And if that happens, then you take it a step further. That leads to decrease on attendance rates, which leads to decreased funding for our schools. And so very practically, first, you have to be in collaboration with your district attorneys, your AG, and other lawyers to ensure that you have legal protections for our communities right out the gate. Because what is being proposed is simply unconstitutional and it's inhumane. Second, we have to make sure we're being very clear on how you're actually supporting those that are coming into our communities. Venezuela is the country that has the largest community that's coming in. Thereafter, it's actually Russia and China. You wouldn't hear that from TV right now. And so we have to make sure that we have language access so that for our community that is coming in, we're actually supporting them and welcoming them. Let me be very clear. The language and the conversations that are happening around those that are in the extreme minority of the criminals that they're trying to talk about, that is not the overwhelming number that are people that are here in our communities. They're looking for a chance. They're looking for an opportunity. And take it a step further to your question, we have unutilized space in this city that if we did it correctly, we can provide support for those that are coming in, give them wraparound support, and it is not taking away from New Yorkers as well. We have allowed the rhetoric to be as such to make it seem that we are losing by welcoming others. That is not who we are. That is not what is happening, and it is simply not true. And so we have to make it an approach of the understanding of federal, state, and city dynamics are all intertwined, and be on the safeguard to counter the absolutely unacceptable language that is coming from Donald Trump, and quite frankly, being supported by the current mayor as well.
We have one quick question.
Hey, Michael, thank you for.
Good to see you.
I just wonder, I don't know if this is, as a state legislator, what is the piece of legislation that you worked on that you're most proud of?
I'll give a combined answer if that's all right. It would be the prompt pay bill and the My Brother's Keeper bill, which were both in the same budget. My Brother's Keeper, we're the only state in the country where we provide funding for young men of color to go to school and graduate from school. The prompt pay bill is a bipartisan bill that we pay businesses in 15 days that are less than 300 employees across the state when you contract with the state. Both of which were in the same budget, and it's very practical. It allowed for us to pay people faster, and it allowed us to give kids a chance to be able to go to school and graduate. That's the epitome of what we should be. We should actually help more people be able to thrive and succeed and grow in a very practical manner. Say again? Oh, well, the My Brother's Keeper program was boys and young men of color. There's a separate My Sister's Keeper program that exists. There is, absolutely. You said 2 minutes? I see.
Hi.
Oh.
Hi,
saw
I
two
do have another
separate-
question.
Okay.
Hi, I'm here. I wanted to ask you a question about the real estate developers in the city. Real estate developers are building multi-million-dollar condos everywhere, all over the city. I mean, every block is being torn down. What should the city be asking of the real estate developers in terms of paying back to the city and housing people who actually need housing as opposed to people buying multi-million-dollar condos?
Well, we should take away the tax incentives for someone that's warehousing units and warehousing buildings. That is absolutely unjust, fundamentally, right? We see that happening all over the city right now, where people are literally holding on to buildings and units, hoping that they could get market rate for the purposes of pushing people out and amplifying gentrification and displacement. City of Yes didn't go far enough. City of Yes didn't actually address the affordability crisis, and City of Yes actually didn't build enough units itself. So when we think about, to your question, we have to actually have incentives so that it is making sure that the working and middle class actually get access to this. Second, and this is something I did as the chair of the Mitchell-Lama Committee, we have to make sure that people stop getting jumped on waiting lists that have been waiting for so long to actually have a chance to get in. So yes, we can build more and we need to build more, but we got to build more that's actually affordable to New Yorkers. What's the purpose of building if you actually can't get there? Third and finally, we have to actually incentivize local median income. AMI is not working. It is too broad. It is not specific enough. We are seeing in other cities across the country that you can actually have a responsible approach around holding developers accountable, that you will only get funding you actually will build in this particular way, but focusing on how it is actually localized and not just spread throughout the city will give you a better chance.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
I also want to acknowledge former district leader Judy Wood is here. She's just sort of sneaking off in the background, but thank you, Judy. Good to see you. Our next candidate is Scott Stringer. Scott was Assemblyman, Manhattan Borough President, Public Advocate, and Comptroller, and is a welcome friend to the club. Good to see you. Scott, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, and it's really great to be back at Three Parks. This is not my first rodeo, so I know how tough the questions can be. but I do want to say that this club has really done amazing work, not just on the West Side, but really throughout the country, in Pennsylvania, in places, electing congressional candidates and fighting for our democracy. So I just want to give you all a big round of applause because this club really has made a big difference. And one of the things I think that we all have in common is we love New York City. But right now, this city and this government is broken. We have people who can't get by on their paychecks. We have the most fundamental lack of affordable housing, a child care system that's not meeting the needs of working families, and we have a government that has never, ever been this corrupt in modern history. In fact, this may be the most corrupt government, and it's been allowed to perpetuate around the city. So I was fine after 30 years in government, serving in the assembly, serving as your borough president, serving as controller, to wish Eric Adams well and just take my kids to school, right? I was okay with that. I would come out and I would participate, but I did not have this urge to run, except for the fact that every day we were out there with my family, I saw suddenly the city slowly collapsing. And I realized that we do not, as New Yorkers, have to take this anymore. We do not have to accept mediocrity or minimalism. We are the greatest city in the world, that we should start acting like it. And the way to do that is we build a government that actually is going to make a difference. Now, you know me. I have never served in an office that I did not fundamentally change. When I was in the state assembly, I initiated the first rules reform in 100 years of the state legislature. We ended up DC voting. We reformed the system. I introduced the first bill to tax wealthy people with Franz Leichter because it was time to fight Pataki's budget cuts, and we knew how to do that. When I became borough president, we actually initiated something called community board reform. We integrated our community boards. We made sure they were representative. And we went to a merit-based selection process that made a whole lot of developers nervous because we were going to do it by the book. And as controller, I fundamentally changed that office for decades to come, literally. We became an office that fixed the pension system, the back office of the pension system. Nobody knew about it, but we did it. The second thing we did was we divested $4 billion from the fossil fuel industry, and we made a historic divestment. And we didn't stop there, folks. We divested from guns. We divested from the horrors of private prisons. People said to me, "You can't do this." And I said, "We have to do it, and we will do it." We also settled the innocent cases, innocent people, mostly people of color, who were convicted for crimes that they didn't commit. The DNA proved that. I worked with Ken Thompson, the DA, and made sure that we would settle those cases. New York Times said it was never done before, but we did this. I tell you this for two reasons. It is time to elect a mayor who knows what the hell to do. It's just time. And experience and vision and competence can transform this city. I tell you what I did because I want to just spend a couple minutes telling you what I'm going to do. But before that, I want you to know that the secret sauce of governing is to actually know what you don't know. And rather than bring in the friends who don't know what they're doing and don't care about the city, what I'm known for is bringing in the best and the brightest. And if I'm elected mayor, I promise you, in every agency, from City Hall to every agency, we are going to build a government that you're going to be proud of. It's not going to be about me. It's going to be about us. And we're going to bring talent in because that's what we need to do the following. We need to build Mitchell-Lama 2.0. It's how I got my start organizing Mitchell-Lama tenants right here in the urban renewal area. We need to do that. We have 1,000 vacant parcels of land that we own, the city owns. Rather than give that to the big developers, let's give that land back to the people. If you have free land, the not-for-profits can build the housing that we need, integrated housing, affordable housing. And let me say this. How about we build low-income housing? Do you agree with me? Maybe that's what we actually need to start talking about in the city. So I'm going to do that. The other thing we're going to do is we are going to alleviate the financial challenges in the city. We need a child care plan. We got to make sure that people can actually get their kids to a safe space at an early age so they can learn. And right now, childcare is out of reach unless you're at the top 1 or 2% in the city. So our Tri-Share childcare plan is about sharing the burdens with families. If you live in a poverty situation, you pay nothing. If you pay and you make a little more, you pay a little something more. But we get the private sector to pay in, and the city, 60% of the city money is from federal and state grants. And we build a child care system that can navigate for parents. Every dollar spent on child care, $8 comes back to the city. And more importantly, we send people back to the workforce, mostly women. The other thing I'm going to do, and I'm dead serious about this, we are going to make sure that kids can stay in school till 4:30 in the afternoon. We've got to get them off the streets. And we need tutors, and we need help for our children. We need real after school. And the way you build all these things is by making sure we have a mayor who has experience doing this work. So I'm here today to tell you that competence matters, experience matters, and most importantly, vision matters. And we must have a zero tolerance for the ethical challenges that has befallen City Hall. Now, I know how to win. I've run tough races. Andrew Cuomo is going to come into this race. And this will be his last stand. We knocked out Spitzer, we'll knock out Cuomo. But to do that, we need to build a citywide coalition. And it starts on the Upper West Side, it always has, and it starts with 3 parks. So I'm excited to get going. I hope you'll consider supporting me. But I want to say I have a lot of respect for this room, and quite frankly, I would not have been in elective office many times without the support of this club, the leadership, and so many of you on the Upper West Side, and it's just really great to be here. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions. Ms. Elizabeth Kellner.
Hello. Hi. Known you since you were a teenager.
What'd you say?
You were thinner. But that's okay. Anyway,
I'm feeling better.
This is a citywide race. This is a contest in which voter turnout is abysmal, historically abysmal, even when we have so much at stake as we do right now. So what is your message to people outside of the Upper West Side and throughout this city to build a citywide campaign?
It's getting right to how we win this race. And look, I think what I bring to the table is not just being very well known in voter-rich pockets of the city like Manhattan, but also as controller, I've traveled this city for 8 years. I've been in every church. I've been in every shul. I'm not exaggerating. I've been to almost every single community board in this city, in all the great diverse communities. And believe me, this is the most greatest diverse city in the world. They know me. They know the work that I've done. So my head start is I can build the citywide coalition. When we were down 20 points when I was running for controller and I was only Manhattan Borough president, I learned, Elizabeth, that we had to go out there and build that coalition in 9 weeks. I also understood that when you get elected, you also have to keep coming back to the community. And I believe, if you see some of the polls that are coming out now, that I think we are in a good position to win, but it's also a good position to build that multiracial, intergenerational coalition. And so I'm ready to do it. I've done it before. I think we could do it again. And the stakes have never been higher. We must win this election. If the wrong people win, you know what's going to happen. We cannot survive in a city with the wrong mayor fighting Trump and not doing business for our city, and I think I'm ready to do it.
More questions. Going to balance the room. Anybody over here? Questions for Scott Stringer? Over there? Over here? Go ahead, Chuck.
I worked for the city for 25 years. Wait for the mic. Okay. I worked for the city. Hi, I worked for the city for 25 years. 4 years ago, we had a mayor promise not to take away our Medicare. The mayor has taken away, or is trying to take away our Medicare, and it's only because we've litigated the damn thing for 2.5 years. First of all, how are you going to fight OMB when they tell you you've got to take money away from the seniors? And second of all, well, that's the main issue. How are you going to stand up for it and not be what happened to Adams, where he was apparently just told, we've got to get this money from the seniors? And so that's my question.
Well, first of all, just to set the record straight, the mayor appoints the OMB guy or woman. And they're not going to tell this mayor what to do. The truth is, the deal is that the people in city service sacrificed a lot to serve our city. And a deal was made and a commitment was made to make sure that for less money, long hours, and at times doing very dangerous work, at the end of that time, you would be assured that you could take care of your family and your health needs. That will never be compromised when I'm mayor. The other thing is, I'm a retiree. 36 years in the system. Started when I was 12. So don't worry about me. We'll settle that quickly.
There was another question over here.
Thank you. The next 4 years, I think everybody understands that New York City is going to be on the top of the list of Trump revenge and punishment. He's going to try and punish New York City for all the things that the city have done to him. Where do you see the vulnerabilities, and how do you plan to protect the city from Donald Trump?
Well, I've done it once before. This is the second Trump go-around, and I served as controller when we had to meet our challenges. First and foremost was the whole issue of climate change. You know, we had to divest from fossil fuels, stop fracking, and all the climate issues that I led on. Some of that occurred during the Trump administration. When it came to ICE trying to pick up people outside, in their homes and take away families, I was on the front lines, not just demonstrating, but also working with our congressional delegation to try to do everything in our legal power to do that. Tonight, I was at a church, St. Mark's Church, meeting with migrants, immigrants, New Yorkers, right? Making sure that we're going to resource and fund the programs that will protect people and their families. One of the reasons why I was motivated to run for mayor was I was watching Eric Adams at a press conference with the police, and he was in a gymnasium talking about how proud he was of his work with the migrants, and they showed a picture of these children in a gym, right, with blankets, with their single parent, mostly their mothers, on the gym floor, and he thought that that was success. And I'm thinking to myself watching this, oh my God, imagine these kids, one will be an engineer, one will be a Pulitzer Prize winner, one will be a mayor, and he just did the minimum. So I can't wait to be the protector of the city, but I will tell you this. Anyone can tell you that they will protect anything. The challenge for people in this mayor's race is, who do you believe has the experience and the competence and the track record of managing thousands of people, managing a $200 billion pension fund, having served in Albany not with the Democrats in the Senate, but with the Republicans in the Senate, and someone who understands how you build those coalitions. I believe what I offer is, yes, the passion and the commitment and the vision that we all share, but also the person who is most likely to build a government that will get that done.
Hi. I'm curious. I liked a lot of your ideas, but how are you going to pay? How are you going to pay for the ideas you just proposed in terms of care for children, low-income housing, et cetera, et cetera? Who's going to get taxed? Who should get taxed?
Well, look, one of the advantages that I have to be in the next administration, quite frankly, is I've served as the chief fiscal officer of this city for 8 years. I've audited every city agency. I've audited NYCHA 19 times. I've rooted out waste and I've rooted out fraud, but I also have an understanding of how to budget. and how you don't make promises that you can't keep. Now, I know in this mayor's race, we're going to go from spending promising, to spend $200 billion, even though we have a $114 billion budget. That's campaign stuff. But for me, we're laying out an agenda that we can pay for. And I'll give you an example. The reason that I don't say universal or child care for all without telling you how we pay for it is because it's not going to happen that way, right? So that's why our child care plan has a price tag. When we talk about after school and say, yes, it's going to cost $300 million in the first year to actualize a plan to get kids to 430, the money is there. Here's one way we're going to cut the budget and save money. And I used to do this when I was controller. We used to have what I call a financial watch list. So we used to watch who was spending money and getting no results. I'm going to do that due diligence, but I'm also going to be able to turn around to everybody and say, this is what we can do to save. Right now, for police overtime, we went from spending $650 million to $1.3 billion. Overtime. It's got to stop, right? Because do you feel safer for it? You don't. And we need to understand that you have to look at those numbers without cutting pre-K and 3K. And one of the things that the Adams administration did that was so outrageous was lie about the budget. There was no budget transparency. Remember, the immigrants, the migrants were being blamed for the destruction of the city. Remember, it was a $10 billion deficit that we were going to be in. It was not true. We had a $4 billion surplus. And we stood up and said, this is not true. So you need a mayor who's going to talk truthfully to you, a mayor who understands budgeting, and I believe, hopefully in the course of this campaign, I will not overpromise and tell you what we're going to do that we can't afford that ends up not getting done. We had that with de Blasio, we had that with Adams, and I think we have to change that. By the way, I am not the controller. I am the warm-up act for the controller. Brad Lander has arrived. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
For all the candidates who are here, in the front row is Corinne. She has a time sheet. Her word is law. Okay, I think next on our schedule is current controller Brad Lander. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please join us up front.
Good evening, Three Parks. It is great to be back with you. Thank you, Daniel and Teresa and Lorraine and Steve and Lynn and all of you. I really am grateful to be here at this club tonight, this week. It's so great that the first thing you did before you had us was pass that resolution against mass deportation. I think of this club as the place where what your new great assembly member Michael Lasher calls West Side values, but I think of as New York values, puts them into practice through organizing on issues and in electoral politics. This is a dark week. We got a president who is passing executive orders to end birthright citizenship and do mass deportations and threaten local law enforcement like Alvin Bragg and Tish James, on and on. He even today passed an executive order repealing an anti-discrimination protection signed into executive order by Lyndon Johnson. That's what's going on. Meanwhile, we have a mayor who is kowtowing to him, putting our neighbors at risk, putting us at risk, all for his own pardon, putting his interest over all of ours. And long before he was seeking a pardon for his indictment, he was already failing New Yorkers. Let's take the issue of asylum seekers, as we documented in our audits over and over again. Rather than help people get work authorization, land in good jobs, and get out of shelter, this is someone who gave no-bid emergency contracts to for-profit companies and put New Yorkers in harm's way. We need a mayor who will stand up for our values and also who can make sure our city lives up to our values. And that is why I'm running and asking for your support. I will for sure stand up for the values of this club as Donald Trump threatens them, and I will make sure our city can do better to live up to our values, to make sure this city is safer and more affordable and more livable and better run, so that we are proving that those West Side values, those New York values, actually work as we then protect each other. And that's why I'm running. Last week, I put out a comprehensive, ready on day one plan to end street homelessness for people with serious mental illness in New York City. This does not have to be a city where people with mental illness are cycling from street to subway to hospital to jail and back again. I've got a plan to end it, make our city safer and more humane. A city that lives up to its values is a more affordable city. That's what I have been working on my whole life, 30 years long before I was in elected office, running 2 affordable housing nonprofits, preserving and building thousands of units of affordable housing. I am not taking any contributions from developers in this campaign, so you know I will be focused on housing that is genuinely affordable. Take a look at the Gowanus rezoning I passed, the largest affordable housing rezoning in the city's recent decades. 8,000 units of housing, 3,000 of them genuinely affordable to low-income and working-class families. And one of the housing plans I'm most excited about was co-developed with Michael Lasher. It's called Homes for City Workers. And it'll take pension funds and invest them alongside our teachers and firefighters and social workers and school crossing guards. So if a teacher could afford a $400,000 mortgage, we'll match it with $400,000 from the pension funds. Now they could buy a home or a co-op for $800,000. We can generate the next generation of affordable home ownership for working class and middle class families in this city. That'll be an inclusive city that people are excited to see growth in because they'll actually be able to imagine their future in it. A city that lives up to its values is a more livable city. That's why I've put forward a most comprehensive plan to deal with moped and e-bike chaos that I know is running wild in your neighborhood. And also when Governor Hochul put congestion pricing on pause, jeopardizing $15 billion in signal modernization and accessible subways and station platforms. I led the coalition that brought the litigation that got it taken off pause, helped get congestion pricing into effect before Trump took effect, and make sure we are going to have the $15 billion we need to invest in mass transit. But for all of that, thank you. For all of that, for a city that's safer and more affordable and more livable, it has to be better run, and that's what I've got the track record to do. In my job as controller, the pension funds are at an all-time high. Last year, we saved $1.8 billion for taxpayers, even as we made the largest investments in affordable housing in the city's history, saving the 35,000 units of rent-stabilized housing put at risk when Signature Bank failed, creating thousands of new units of affordable housing, the boldest decarbonization plan of any public pension fund in the country. My audits have saved hundreds of millions of dollars for the city, the housing department, NYCHA, Administration for Children's Services. When that contract for Medicare Advantage got to the controller's office, I rejected it. We said, no way. We X'd it out. We canceled it. We worked together with the judge, and I am committed to providing our retirees not just great retirement security, but the health care that we promised them. Another contract we refused to sign was the hideous DocGo contract, $432 million no-bid contract. We got it canceled, and those resources are going to provide better services, both for asylum seekers and for taxpayers. I'm the candidate in this race with a demonstrated management track record, with an impeccable record of public integrity and good government, with the bold ideas to move our city forward, and with a broad citywide coalition that can win. Proud to have support announced last week from State Senator Liz Krueger and Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso and Public Advocate Jumaane Williams. I am building a broad coalition. I've raised the most money of any candidate in this race, and with your support, I can make sure we have a city that is safer, that's more affordable, that's more livable, that is better run, so we can both stand up to our values when it is most urgent and live up to our values with a city that genuinely works for everyone. Thank you very much, Three Parks. It is an honor to be here with you, and I'm looking very forward to your questions.
Hello, my name is Isaiah.
I'm sorry, your name is what?
My name is Isaiah.
Isaiah.
Yes, and my question is, in terms of reducing like people who jump over subway turnstiles, I'm just wondering what your plan is with that.
Yeah. So the thing that has worked in cities like London and Paris to reduce turnstile jumping are new station gates. One thing that's important to know is actually most fare evasion is at the exit door. It's not people who jump over the turnstile. That's about 30 or 40%. 60 or 70% is that the emergency door gets held open because that's the only place where people who are in a wheelchair or somebody with a stroller can get through. So the station gates that they have in Paris and London, have that wider gate. And that means you can't jump over them, but people in a wheelchair or people with a stroller can, tap and get through. And that's why I was pleased to see Jano Lieber, a son of the West Side, put in the capital plan station gates at stations that have 75% of the riders to get those new station gates. That's part of the reason congestion pricing was so important. Last year, we spent $150 million on NYPD overtime trying to address this issue. You know how much that $150 million recovered? $104,000. That's not a good use of the resources, but those new station gates actually make money in the transit system. Meanwhile, we of course should expand the fair fares program so that people who genuinely are students or low income can get the half-priced fares that will make it possible for them to be able to afford. And then we can have, and one last thing on the buses, we finally now have Omni readers in both the front and the back of every bus. And now students have their Omni cards, as well, either on their phone or on an Omni card. So we can have all-door boarding on our buses, which would make them move much faster. And then just like when you're on Amtrak or Metro North, there will be people who move through the bus who make sure you paid. We can have a system that doesn't have such massive fare evasion in a way that makes it work better for everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Isaiah.
Hello. I actually have two questions. One is, people keep throwing affordable housing around, but what do you consider to start at affordable housing? Raina.
Raina. Can you guys hear me from here?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Raina. I can't see you, though, from here. In Gowanus, where I mentioned, the affordable units start for families who earn $31,000 a year. So that is the kind of lowest affordable level in Gowanus, like families who earn $31,000 a year. And they go up to about $80,000. So the affordable units kind of range from a family that makes $30,000 a year to about $80,000 a year. The rent on that unit for $31,000, I think, is $784, is the lowest unit in the affordable housing in Gowanus. One other thing we did in Gowanus to make sure it's really affordable, though, is made sure that rezoning also helped public housing residents. There's 1,500 public housing units right nearby. And we said we are not going to do this rezoning unless, in addition to the 3,000 new affordable units, every one of those 1,500 units at Gowanus Houses and Wyckoff Gardens gets a comprehensive modernization. We secured $200 million. It's one of the only developments in the city that is staying traditional Section 9 affordable housing with all the protections that brings, but is getting a comprehensive rehab of every single unit.
Okay. And my second question kind of leads into one thing to another thing. So you talked about congestion pricing, which leads more people onto the train. And we understand that Kathy Hochul is going, put the police officers 9 to 5, 2 per. But my thing is, are we also going to take that surplus and eventually put the MTA police back on the tracks. This way we don't overextend the NYPD. So this way we can get back to the safer routes and train system, the back how my grandmother used to live in New York City.
Yeah. Thank you for this question, which is a really important one. 2 points here. At the heart of my plan, which I hope people will look at, it's called Safer for All, and it was rolled out in the Times last week, to end street homelessness and subway homelessness for people with serious mental illness, is this model that they're using in Salt Lake City and Houston and Denver called Housing First. And in that model, you offer to folks who are unwell and sleeping on the streets or subways an apartment or an SRO with services wrapped around them. It works 70 to 90% of the time. And it's just been proven effective because, look, we want everyone to feel safe and when people see whether it's an MTA officer or an NYPD officer, but unless you have housing, you're not going to be able to do anything about folks who are homeless and unwell. This model has been proven to work, and it can save money that you can use in ways to make sure you're targeting safety where it needs to go. The other thing is, though, that the state dramatically cut resources to the city, both for our shelters and for mental health. When Andrew Cuomo, who may be coming into this race, was governor, his Medicaid cuts decimated mental health investments in New York City, and he also cut the shelter reimbursement rate. New York State used to pay about half of our shelters, and now they pay less than 10% of them. So we need the state to create the Housing Access Voucher Program to provide some housing vouchers and to restore what they provided both for shelter and for mental health, so the city has its resources that we can focus on safety, on affordability, and on our schools and parks and everything else. Thank you for the question.
Another question, quick question.
You're not going to like my question. It's about congestion pricing, and I'm sorry to focus on that, but and I understand your enthusiasm about it, but being a Queens girl, okay, I'm very much in touch with that borough. And I have to tell you that it's very unpopular, that the transit system does not operate properly in the outer boroughs. How are you going to win?
This is a great question.
If they won't vote for you.
And I really appreciate it. I mean, this congestion pricing is such a great example. You're right. No one likes the idea of a new charge, and there are plenty of places where it's not popular. And I think folks in this room understand we've got to have the resources to invest in mass transit if we're going to save the subways and invest in our bus system. So first, you have to show people it's actually going to work for them, that they're going to get real benefits from it. I think the IBX is one good example of that. In terms of how I'm going to win, I've got the broadest coalition in this race already of announced support. When I won for controller, I had this great coalition. You could look at the maps of where folks voted for me that had a lot of people who voted for Maya Wiley in the mayor's race, a lot of people who voted for Catherine Garcia in the mayor's race, but also a lot of black and brown and working class voters in the outer boroughs. What I can promise people is I'll make government work better for them. That's what they doubt, and that's what I've got a track record of doing.
Just quick, I mean, I understood, but that was then and this is now, and they're really suffering financially.
Of course people are suffering because child care costs are out of control, because housing costs are out of control.
I'm doing this to help you,
yeah.
Okay? Because I don't think they're going to vote. They're going to be very upset about that. I'm just saying,
yeah.
From what I'm hearing.
There was a great article in the Times last weekend by a guy named Henry Graybar about what we have to do to show that it actually works and deliver. Take a look at it and see what you think. I want to make one more commitment. I see my time is up, but I think this is an opportunity just to pledge one thing about building coalitions, and I really hope you'll think about this in the room tonight. Obviously, I'm running because I think I would do the best job and I have the best chance to win, but I want to plead with you in this room. We cannot have Eric Adams or Andrew Cuomo be the next mayor of this city. We cannot have that. And what I will pledge to you, as I mentioned with, had Maya Wiley and Catherine Garcia cross-endorsed each other toward the end last time, one of them would be the mayor right now. And we would not have Eric Adams at the inauguration and on Tucker Carlson. And I am committing to you, I'm going to run this campaign to win, And I'm going to pledge I will work with you and the other candidates in this race to make sure that as it gets closer, we are strategic so that we can coordinate together and guarantee a city that has neither a Cuomo nor Eric Adams as its mayor. That's a promise I'm making to you. Thank you very much, Three Parks. It was wonderful to be with you tonight.
Okay, let's go to our next candidate, and that would be Zoran Mamdani, who is New York State Assembly member from Astoria and Long Island City. This is better.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. My first commitment is that I will not cross that line. Good evening, everyone. My name is Zohran Mamdani. I am the Assembly member for Astoria and Long Island City. I launched this campaign, well, thank you, you can clap for that. Appreciate that. I launched this campaign for mayor about 3 months ago. And at that time, the political and the media class of the city had come to a consensus that the most pressing crisis in the lives of New Yorkers was that of corruption engulfing City Hall. And we launched this campaign arguing that it was in fact something else. It was cost of living to be specific. Because if you could not afford your rent, your maintenance fee, or your mortgage, if you could not afford your groceries or your childcare or your Metro card, then you could not afford to worry about anything happening outside of your own life. And as part of that, when we launched the campaign, we did so with 3 explicit promises that would directly address this crisis in the lives of working class New Yorkers. The first was to freeze the rent for more than 2 million New Yorkers who live in rent-stabilized housing. The second was to make buses free across the 5 boroughs of New York City, building on the successes that I had seen as an assembly member launching a campaign titled Fix the MTA, which I won't explain why we called it that, a campaign that won a free bus pilot. 1 bus route in each borough was made free for the duration of a year. And what we saw is that when we did so, ridership went up by more than 30%, assaults on bus drivers dropped by 38.9%, and in this moment of the climate crisis, we saw it was very effective at moving people into a different mode of transit, taking 11% of New Yorkers who were previously driving a car or taking a taxi, and 11% of the new riders then became public transit users on those buses, with one of those buses right here at the M116. Finally, the pledge to make childcare universal, whether your child is 6 weeks or 5 years of age. These were the opening promises we made. A few weeks later, Donald Trump was elected the president of this country once again. And as we saw the results come in, we saw that across the entire nation, the greatest swing towards Donald Trump was right here in New York State. 11.5 points towards Trump. And when we saw where that happened, it was far from the caricature we had been told about Trump voters. Remarkably, it was in fact in the heart of immigrant New York City. So I went myself to Fordham Road in the Bronx. I went to Hillside Avenue in Southeast Queens. And I asked New Yorkers, who did you vote for and why? And I spoke to Democrat after Democrat after Democrat who told me either they didn't vote or they voted for Trump. And I asked them why. And they said, I remember having more money in my pocket 4 years ago. I remember affording my rent, my mortgage, my water bill, my Con Ed bill, my groceries, my child care. And I can't afford any of this, but my government can afford multiple wars at the same time. And as insincere, ridiculous, and horrific as we know Donald Trump to be, I heard New Yorker after New Yorker identifying his campaign as the ones speaking to what they were living through. And I asked them, what would it take to bring you back to the party that you're currently enrolled in? Mind you, this conversation was at times in English, at times in other languages. And they said, a relentless focus on an economic agenda. And I asked them, what would you say to a proposal to freeze the rent, to make buses free, to make childcare universal, whether your child is 6 weeks or 5 years? And they said, I would vote for that candidate. And I introduced myself as a candidate for mayor running on that very platform. And I promised them that this campaign would continue a relentless focus on an economic agenda. And what we have done in the time since then is roll out additional proposals that build on that, one of which we shared with the New York Times, which was to build out a pilot program of city-run grocery stores, one in each borough, building on the successes that we have seen, frankly, in Republican states, as well as a feasibility study that's been done in Chicago, where we could guarantee New Yorkers lower prices at the very thing that is consuming most of their anxiety often about inflation. And we could do so because we would take profit out of the equation, and we could pass on the savings of rent and property tax onto New Yorkers when they make those transactions. Unlike a corporate supermarket chain like Kroger's, which publicly boasts about hiding behind inflation to jack up prices even more. And now I stand before you after having been in this race for about 3 months, proud to announce that in the last fundraising period, we raised $642,000 from 6,500 people across this country, with 5,400 of them being across this city. 84% of our donations from the 5 boroughs. We raised more money than any campaign in that period, from more people than every other campaign combined for that period. And this speaks to a message that is resonating across the 5 boroughs, and this speaks to a moment where New Yorkers are hungry for change, and they're hungry for a campaign that directly addresses the things that they are living through to make this city more affordable. Thank you so much for having me, and I eagerly await your questions. Actually, before we start questions, I must also say it is particularly meaningful to be here in this room with you, because I can see parents of middle school friends of mine, as well as the high school teacher who changed my life, Mark Kagan, who is here. And I say this as someone, when I moved to this city at the age of 7 years old, I lived in this neighborhood. I grew up in this neighborhood. I went to middle school about 10 blocks away from here. And to be here with all of you, it really does move me, and it really does make me feel like I'm coming back to the place it all began.
Good evening, Zoran. Thank you for your comments. I've read your platform, and I know that in it you center the importance, as you described to us, of making this city livable for working class and poor people. And that I believe you are the only candidate who has a transportation program focused on free bus lanes, and we've run a pilot, and you described some of the successes. Do we have evidence that if we scaled it up, that trajectory would continue and that the MTA could manage it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. So, I had spoken about some of the statistics that had come out. The increase in ridership, the decrease in assaults on bus drivers, the shift of individuals who had previously been taking a taxi or their own car onto public transit. But there's one thing I didn't mention, which is that we have a program right now called Fair Fares, which I have supported, which is a program that has a subsidized fare for lower income New Yorkers. Now, the majority of the new riders on these buses make $28,000 or less. Therefore, they are all eligible for this program. But only 14% of them were enrolled in it, which to me speaks to the limits of a means-tested approach to the kind of outcome we want to actually achieve. What I have seen, especially as a New Yorker who benefited so much from universal public goods, is that if you make a good accessible to all, and you don't ask the same New Yorker who's been failed by a bureaucracy to again trust a bureaucracy, you can actually achieve 100% of the target population that you're looking to empower. And the statistics that we saw here, they build on successes that we've seen with Mayor Wu in Boston, making a number of bus routes free. We saw similar benefits for those who needed it most, as well as decreases in dwell time at bus stops. Because if you have a free model of bus service, you can ensure that when the bus stops, a local bus, that the MTA will open both doors. And what that means is everyone can just get on and get off. And it reminds me, the first day that we had the pilot go into action, was so incredible because so often in Albany, you're working and you're having a tough time understanding how is this translating into the lives of New Yorkers. And here was a pilot that needed no translation. And I sat on the BX-18A with a bus driver who told me, today has been a day where for the first time all I'm focused on is driving, nothing else. And as I was talking to him, he got to a stop, a nurse got on the bus, she reached for her MetroCard. He told her, this route is free. She said, what do you mean? He said, this route is free. They've made this route free for a year. And she started dancing on the way down the bus to her seat. And it just showed me, when was the last time a New Yorker felt like they were given a break? That somebody was looking out for them. Now, that nurse probably could have afforded $2.90. But the fact that she has to afford it every single time, and the peace of mind that she can save, and knowing that she's going to be out on a bus where everybody's just getting on and off, and nobody's interacting with that question of can you afford it, all while we know that 1 in 5 New Yorkers cannot.
How can the MTA afford to make the buses free?
Thank you very
when they're already suffering from a financial problems.
Thank you very much for this question. I believe that we have to not only be ambitious but also accurate. And so I have worked very closely with the MTA in finding out the figures for the costing about all of these things, even as they and I both know they disagree with some of this because they're focused only on that which they can achieve the next day. They've had to be subject to years in Albany of being a political football. So here's the thing. In order to make buses free, we have to provide the MTA with additional revenue. We cannot ask them to find it magically, as Andrew Cuomo often did with the MTA. We must actually provide them that funding. Now, I believe that there are a number of ways we can do so. The first is I think the city can play a role towards this. The MTA is a state entity, but the city currently pays the MTA more than $700 million every year to subsidize MTA buses within the New York City transit equation. These are buses that used to be private, early 2000s were brought into the public transit network. So the city is already contributing in many ways. But you might ask, where will the city find the money? There is an issue of political will in our city, where there's a lot of money to be collected, but the city has no interest in. For example, landlords across the city owe our government, our city government, $800 million in uncollected fines. The city has just not collected it. The city is not interested in collecting it. That would pay to make every bus free and then some. And that to me is evidence of the many ways in which we are allowing wealth to gather dust for people who have immense amounts of it, while we're saying we don't have enough for working people. Now the second thing is at the state level. I also think, as I stand here and I advocate for these things, people may think his ideas, his answers are going to be radical, some socialist utopia. I actually point us instead to New Jersey, which I don't think any of us would describe that way. New Jersey has a corporate tax rate at the state level, a number of percentage points higher than that of New York. If we were to simply match the corporate tax rate of New Jersey, we would be able to pay for the entire agenda I've put forward. And you may say, if you increase the corporate tax rate, a corporation may leave New York. But our state tax laws say that you need not be headquartered in this state, only doing business in this state. And as our economy will continue to grow, we know that companies are never going to stop doing business here. Thank you.
At the beginning of your remarks, you posited a distinction between corruption in City Hall and the cost of living crisis that we're all facing. And it seems to me that the two are more interconnected than that, the immense amount of overtime that we're paying to the NYPD is money that could be spent on services for New Yorkers. What are you going to do about the very real corruption problem that we're facing?
Thank you so much for this question. I wish more people defined corruption the way you did. Sadly, too often the focus, when I was referring to that, was about questions with regards to Mayor Adams specifically. Very real questions that have to be answered, but questions that I think that have to be part of this kind of an agenda. To your example of NYPD overtime, We have NYPD overtime that is nearing $1 billion on average every year. And as has been said by many candidates, we can't point to much for what it has actually achieved. I believe we have to eliminate that entire overtime budget. And I believe we have to do so because we have to treat the NYPD like we treat every other aspect of city government. Treated them by the same rules. Now it may sound radical, but when Eric Adams ran for mayor in 2021, he pledged he was going to eliminate the NYPD overtime budget in half by the first year. And what we have found is while he ran on a promise of telling New Yorkers that you need not have to choose between safety and justice, he has not delivered on one of them and he's completely forgotten about the other. I think we have to ask ourselves, how do we actually create safety and do so in ways that are shown by the data? Because so often our leaders pivot to the same tropes and the same ideas when we can't actually see much results from partaking in that. So one thing that I'm excited about is that in the next month, we are going to be putting forward a proposal to create a new department called the Department of Community Safety. And what this department is going to do is pioneer mental health outreach and homelessness outreach within our public transit system, specifically the subway system, taking what is currently a crisis of vacant commercial units across our subway system. Because I remember growing up in this neighborhood, taking the 1 to the 2, then transferring at Times Square, I would always walk by the record store. They would always be playing a song, they'd always be selling those CDs or headphones, and that's gone now. It's a vacant unit. Those units could be providing services and outreach to the very New Yorkers who we have currently tasked the NYPD to speak to, of which the NYPD has no training to do that, and no mandate other than can you disappear a social problem as quickly as possible. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you all so much, and thank you for considering this campaign.
Okay, our next candidate is Zelnor Myrie, and he is a New York State Senator from Brooklyn. So let's give him a hand.
Good evening. I know the hour is getting late, but we do call in response in this city. Good evening. Good evening. All right, that's what I'm talking about. So firstly, thank you for having me tonight. I know that you've heard a lot of candidates and that you've heard a lot of speeches, and so I want to get real for a second and get to it if that's okay. I would probably not be standing here if not for what 3 Parks did in 2018. Because in 2018, there was something very confusing happening in New York State. We had elected more Democrats than Republicans, but somehow Republicans maintained control of the legislature. No Democratic legislation able to get through because rogue Democrats, the Independent Democratic Conference, empowered Republicans during Trump's first presidency. It was a shame. Trump Democrats, we call them, blocked everything that mattered to everyday New Yorkers, blocked reproductive health rights, blocked voting rights, blocked gun safety legislation, blocked tenant protections, blocked climate protections. And this had a particular impact on the community that I came from. For many black New Yorkers, it was my neighbors that were getting evicted because we didn't have tenant protections. It was my elementary school that didn't have enough money for basic supplies. Our transit system deprived of millions of dollars, rental assistance cut so that homelessness was up. Hundreds of millions of dollars cut from our hospitals in black communities. And there was one man behind the entire operation. Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo. A Democratic governor that would come into our sacred spaces would sit in our pews, stand up in our pulpits, but hurt our communities. I couldn't understand it. So I stood up. I ran, had to fight, and we did it together. Y'all got petition signatures. You wrote postcards, knocked on doors, were at the subway station, had house parties, and we won in 2018. We beat his IDC. And on the first day on the job, I passed something called early voting. We ushered in the very first gun industry accountability law in the nation. Climate protection, tenant protection, reproductive right protection, and so much more. So look, we're here tonight because we need new leadership in New York City. We need a new leader in City Hall, especially because the current leader prefers Mar-a-Lago with his new bestie. But we also don't need the architect of that very IDC. We don't need a former governor more interested in his own power and reputation rehab. We need a mayor that cares more about saving New York than saving himself. A mayor that is relentlessly and urgently focused on the things that you care about. Someone who wakes up every day and says, how can I ensure that everyone in this room can afford to live in this city? How can I ensure that every single community is safe? That's the kind of mayor that I'm going to be in City Hall. And that's the energy that I'm going to be bringing to City Hall. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to be with you tonight. And I ask you humbly to join me in this fight so that we can have a new direction in this city. Looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
And you're welcome. Any questions for Senator Meyer in the back? Over here. One over here. And we have right here. And then we have you. Yeah.
Hi, same question I asked before because I think it's really important. What are you going to do to make the city more sustainable, and how are you going to support Local Law 97?
Great question. I didn't hear it the first time it was asked. But for Local Law 97, I think the city has completely fallen down on the job. We are making breaks and exceptions in our regulations that benefit the wealthiest people in this city and undercut the reason that we passed Local Law 97 in the first place. So I'd be putting every tool at our disposal to ensure that the regulations are done in such a way not to harm the law, but to propel the law. And we do it in a way that ensures that the spirit of the law is maintained. On sustainability, we are a city that is surrounded by water. And as we thoughtfully and emotionally think about our neighbors on the other side of the country who've seen entire homes and neighborhoods leveled by wildfires, we have to consider what the possibility is for that same type of climate disaster right here in this city. We are not resilient enough. We do not have enough porous pavement. We do not have enough rain gardens. We have not revamped our sewer system. We have not done enough on our coastline to ensure that we have access to the water, but that we are also protected. And so I would like to focus very squarely on ensuring that the city is more resilient. There's some things we can do on the state level right now. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill called Rain Ready that would give our local environmental department clear authority to bond, to get capital for green infrastructure, green and gray infrastructure. And that's something that I think we have to pass on the state level so that we have all the authority needed to be resilient.
Hi. I'm familiar with your record as chair of the New York State Senate Elections Commission. So I think you've sold yourself short a little there just talking about early voting. And I was wondering if you could speak to some of the other progress we've made with voting in New York State, what you think might happen in New York City, as well as campaign finance reform.
Great, and thank you very much for the question. I'm going to start with a city level goal that I'd like to achieve and then talk about some of the things we've done in the state. We passed a law that allowed for 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote. But what we have not done is given each school the resources that they need to help with that pre-registration. So something I'd like to do as the next mayor of this city is to have a democracy officer in every single high school whose job it is solely to focus on pre-registration and ensuring that our young people are involved in the democratic process as early as possible. What we've done on the state level, and one of the things I'm most proud of, is something called the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of New York. This is the strongest voter protection law on the state level in the entire country. And we did it at a time where there was national intransigence in getting anything done on voter protection. I'm really proud of that because it's already been used to help protect vulnerable voters all across this state, including right here in New York City. We've made over, when I was chair of the Elections Committee, we made over 100 changes to the election law. We were very serious about the job, about opening up our democracy. And despite this president pardoning the people that attacked our democracy on January 6th, we said that there is no way that in this state we're going to allow the franchise to be attacked and not go answered. And so I'm really proud of that work. I'm excited as now the chair of the Codes Committee, where we're going to be talking a lot about public safety and what we can do to ensure that on the state level, but I'm also proud of what we did on elections.
Yeah. Everybody, like I said, everybody talks about affordable housing, but what is your plan for affordable housing? And again, at what income demographic are you looking at?
Yeah, so and thank you for the question. I think it's really important that we preserve the largest stocks of affordable housing that we have right now. I grew up in a rent-stabilized apartment. My mom still lives in a rent-stabilized apartment. And that's why I was really proud, not just to be a part of, but to help lead the fight on the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, which was the strongest New York tenant protections that we saw in over half a century. I think we have to be doing more as a city to support those tenants. We have a great right to counsel program that is not fully funded. I want to fully fund right to counsel. I want to extend right to counsel to homeowners. Because we have homeowners that are facing foreclosure and deed theft that go into court without counsel or without any sort of protection. So I'd like to do that as well. I have a plan to invest more in our NYCHA developments, which I think, it's important for us to be honest about where we have been and what needs to be done on that front. And then when it comes to what AMI band or what the salary is, I think we also have to be honest about this conversation. There are middle-class New Yorkers who cannot afford to stay in this city. My wife and I, born and raised in central Brooklyn, we both went to the same elementary school. We live blocks away from that elementary school, but the prospect of us owning a home in that neighborhood feels impossible. And both of us work for the state. So I think we have to be providing housing for all income bands, people who are really struggling to stay in the city, but we want to attract people to the city as well. So I have a plan to not only preserve, but to build, and I think we need an all-of-the-above approach.
Hi, could you describe your philosophy and your approach to community policing?
So this is something that's really personal to me for a number of reasons. One, my mom was robbed at gunpoint when I was very young, and her worldview on public safety and policing is informed by that experience. But I'm also someone that was very publicly pepper sprayed and arrested just for attending a protest, and who couldn't get any remedy through the normal channels of accountability. So I think New Yorkers hold these two truths together, that we need policing, but we also need protection of our rights, and that we need accountability. So I think we need smarter deployment. Growing up, I remember walking from school back to home. I knew the officers that were on the way from school to home. Anytime I would take the train or the bus, my mom had a little more peace of mind because there was some presence. But it wasn't just a punitive presence. It was one that was there at our community gatherings. People felt comfortable approaching. Right now, we have one of the lowest clearance rates in the entire country. Crimes are not solved, and so people don't feel comfortable going to law enforcement if they know there's not going to be some measure of accountability. So I think we need, one, to work on actually doing the thing on solving crimes. But I also think it's important for us to have a robust accountability structure. We're going to be releasing a public safety plan pretty soon where you'll have some more details on my thoughts there.
Other questions? Other questions? I see you.
Hi. I wanted to ask you a question about real estate developers. What do you think the city should be asking of them? I feel like they get an awful lot out of the city, but don't give that much back.
So I think in order for us to bring down demand, in order for us to make the city more affordable, I do think that we have to build more. But we cannot do that without also holding people accountable who break the law. And what we have seen is a depletion of the agencies responsible for holding bad actors in the industry accountable. There's not enough personnel. There have not been enough inspections. I was someone who, on the state level, had great issue with the 421A tax credit because what we were giving, we were not getting in return by way of affordability. So I do think that there needs to be some incentive, but that has to come with accountability as well. So my Department of Buildings, my HPD would be very, very proactive in going after people who have not agreed to our tax contracts, that is, providing levels of affordability in exchange for the tax incentive, but also for people who are letting their buildings fall into disrepair. I think it is really, really important that those bad actors be held accountable, and that's what would be happening under a Mayoral administration.
Last question, Theo.
Yes, hi, Zelno. I'm asking the question because you're running for the first time on a city-wide territory. I asked the same question 4 years ago to all the other candidates that were here, and their answer hasn't been answered yet. Basically, there is a small problem with the nonprofit developer who all take the low-income people and give them loans and stack up loan on them. And this sector is very notorious within that problem for the HDFC. The question I had asked them was, what will you do for transparency to be added to the contract of private-public enterprise so they can be visible in the passport system? Basically, if a contract is taken by a nonprofit, which is going to happen with the RAD SIST program with Section 9 into the NYCHA development, what will you do as mayor to make possible for the contractor to put those documents openly in the passport program so we don't have to foil HPD who don't answer their foil? That's the question.
Okay. Pretty softball question, Theo. I'm joking. 10
years ago. I'm still waiting for it to happen.
I got it. I got it. I was joking. I got it. Yeah. So one, I think we have just a bad contracting process writ large in the city. We have a lot of nonprofits that have to wait months before getting reimbursed by the city. We have a system that allows for contractors or vendors to give political contributions to the same people that have to grant their contracts. And so I think there are a lot of places in this system that allow for easy corruption that need to become more transparent. That is something that I'd be focused on as mayor. I don't want to opine. It seems like you have a very specific thing that you are referencing, and I'd love to hear more about that very specific thing to figure out how we might come to a solution. Okay. You got it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I I believe that Senator Myrie, his opponent was Jesse Hamilton. I wonder whatever happened to that guy. Oh yeah, he's under investigation. Okay, our next candidate, or my fellow leader, please. Okay, our next candidate is State Senator Jessica Ramos. Thank you so much, Senator Ramos from Queens. Thank you for coming. Good to see you.
All right, good evening. Buenas noches, everyone. My name is Jessica Ramos. I'm a state senator who's been serving now for 6 years. I chair the Labor Committee in the New York State Senate. I'm the mom of 2 boys who are middle school students at a public middle school in Queens. And I am asking for your vote so that I can return to City Hall. Now, I'm a little different looking than the other candidates. I'm the only woman running this year. Thank you. But I'm also the only candidate who's actually worked at City Hall before. And I was proud to round out the team who was able to deliver on universal pre-K, which both of my boys were able to benefit from. And I've seen countless families be disappointed with the cuts that we've been seeing from this current administration, not only to pre-K, but to 3K. When we implemented universal pre-K under the previous administration, we were hoping that the next Democratic mayor would help the city continue to work backwards to deliver on universal child care. We didn't know we were going to end up with a Trump Democrat who was going to play games with our children's money. And while we've done a great job of making sure that we're delivering all of the money that's needed per pupil from Albany, we've unfortunately seen games played with all of our children's money, all the way through high school. So I'm running as a mom who really wants to make sure that in New York City, we're getting childhood right. I believe that that's a great way to make sure that every single generation of New Yorkers is safer than the last. But I also started my public service career 20 years ago as a city council staffer during the Bloomberg administration. And in fact, my office was right across the hall from your councilwoman Gail Brewer's office all the way back then. And I've been admiring her since. I don't know that anybody can match her hustle and her penchant and dedication to her constituents. But yes, you should applaud for your councilwoman. She works very hard for you. But I also want to make sure that in our executive chamber at City Hall, we have a serious person who wants to deliver on everyday services that sometimes we take for granted, but unfortunately we are not feeling right now. I want clean streets. I want our sanitation department to actually put trash cans where they are needed. I want to be able to feel safe everywhere I go, and I certainly want my kids to be able to return home safely as well. Now, I've been fighting for affordability my entire life. I've made a career in the labor movement, which is why I'm labor chair today and have been for the past few years. I'm the state senator who delivered on raising the minimum wage. I'm the state senator who tied the minimum wage to inflation. I've also been able to expand child care eligibility from 275% on the federal poverty line to 400% of the federal poverty line, meaning that there are child care subsidies for families of 4 all the way up to making $80,000, $85,000 a year. That's a big game changer for New York City families, and yet not enough families are taking advantage of this help. And that's largely because we speak so many languages, and we've done a very poor job from City Hall to make sure that we are meeting New Yorkers where they are and that we speak the languages that they speak. So not only would I be the first woman mayor, the first Latina mayor, I'd probably be the first mayor who actually speaks another language fluently. And let me tell you, it's about making sure that our taxpayer dollars are really getting used where they are. And it's really about being able to talk to all sorts of different workforce groups, including the deliveristas who are traveling on e-bikes, which I helped legalize because I wanted to minimize the negative interactions with police officers so that they wouldn't be, that wouldn't be a means to deportation. But we have to make sure our cityscape and the way we're communicating to them actually makes sense, so that there are rules that they can follow, so that they do know where to go. I'm also running because I've seen what dire need there is for mental health services in our city. A week ago, I released Harmony NYC, which is my plan for mental health services, in order to weave services throughout our school system, at our workplaces, and everywhere else on our streets. You know, it's been really hard. As someone who doesn't have a driver's license, I'm from Jackson Heights, Queens. I have 5 different train lines, so I've never had a driver's license, never owned a car. I want to really make sure that our public transportation is reliable and in that way be a good partner to our governor. But it also means that we have to get those who are struggling with severe mental illnesses out of the subway. It's not okay, it's not compassionate, it's not progressive to allow people who are struggling continue to find refuge in our MTA system when they're suffering with severe mental illness, and there is no place right now for people to go and actually get the services that they need. I want to be able to reopen so many of the mental health institutions that former Governor Cuomo closed, be able to restaff them, refurbish them, resource them, so that there are places that folks can go to seek those services. And it shouldn't really be the NYPD leading that charge. I want to be able to upskill our EMS and EMT workers so that we can actually inject mental health professionals, social workers, all the way through clinicians and psychiatrists who can identify people and actually put them on a path to recovery. It might be short term, sometimes it's going to be very long term. But we have to get serious and honest about those challenges that are before us, especially after the pandemic. In the state Senate, I've been leading the charge on the expansion of mental health courts. I want to be able to deliver on real sustainable public safety. Thank you. I know you've been a tremendous advocate in that endeavor. But when I go to these mental health court graduations, I get to hear stories from people who point to losing their caregiver, their mother, the person who was administering their medication. They lost them during the pandemic, and they really spiraled from there. We cannot continue to repeat the same mistakes of the past. That's literally the definition of insanity. And we want to really be able, of course, to make sure that public safety is holistic, which is why having a serious housing plan is really important. I'm very proud of the service that I gave prior to being a member of the de Blasio administration. I did some work for the Building Trades Union, and I was able to actually work on a lot of the negotiations for 421A, winning labor standards for a lot of the housing, little housing that has been built so far. And I thoroughly understand, as a rent-stabilized tenant myself, that we need to be able to protect the housing stock that we have and make sure that we are serious about building low-income housing, including low-income ownership opportunities, for which I have a bill in the state Senate, and it's my #1 priority this year, but also market rate apartments. And I say that because right now there are too many professionals who are actually roommates in 2 3-bedroom apartments that really should be enjoyed by families with 2, 3 children. So there should be a reshuffling of our housing market so that everybody can continue to make New York City home. I'm born and raised in my district. I'm raising 2 boys in my district. I want to be able to age in place in my city. And as a Labor Democrat, I'm running because I want to be able to protect our seniors and our retirees. There is no reason why we should succumb to Medicare Advantage and anything that comes out of Project 2025. We should be appalled that there would be a mayoral administration that does not keep its promises to its retirees. I want the promises made to me as a Tier 4 city worker when I began. I want those promises kept to me. And I want to be able to say that I live in a city that really does prioritize and consider everyone who has served our city. So I want to thank you all for your time tonight, for giving us an opportunity. I know it's late. I know you've heard from many, many candidates, but I'm also very much looking forward to your questions. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Yes, thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti.
I'm so glad what you said about retirees. You sound like a very well put together person that has experience, and therefore she knows what we want to experience. Okay, saying that, I think that we have to build this city from the ground up. My question is, how would you feel about bringing back civics into our classrooms?
Oh, I love that idea. Yes,
Make better people, make a better city, make a better world.
We need more critical thinkers and good readers. Bring back reading comprehension and actually questioning news sources and being able to identify, what news is real and what is actually fake news. This is a big conversation for me with my two sons who are 11 and 13. My 13-year-old is actually a huge soccer and hockey fan, so a year or two ago, he asked for a subscription to Newsday so that he could keep up with the scores. But of course, that means he now gets the headlines from the actual news. And he has all sorts of questions. Nowadays, I really do believe that those conversations have to be supplemented or sometimes, unfortunately, even begin in the classroom. So we want to be able to equip our teachers with the right training, with the right curriculum in order to help our children be able to distinguish what's real and what's not, but also to understand our history, to know where we come from. And I'll give you a good example. Just yesterday I gave a speech on the floor of the state Senate celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day. There's an annual resolution, of course, to celebrate him and his legacy. And of course, so many of my colleagues rose to point to how MLK's legacy has been incredible for the black community. But it just wasn't about the black community. I would not be standing before you today as the daughter of formerly undocumented immigrants. Yes, my birthright citizenship could be taken away under the current presidential administration. But when Martin Luther King Jr. led the charge for the Voting Rights Act in 1965, it gave Latinos and Asian Americans the right to vote as well. And with it, our right to count in this country and be able to run for office. There's a lot we can do. We need financial literacy for our children. And we need to be able to really have a curriculum that answers to today's world. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, and I asked this previously, but I'd love to hear your answer as well. In your time in the state legislature, what's the piece of legislation that you've worked on or got passed that you're most proud of?
That's really tough. Thank you for the question. As I mentioned, raising the minimum wage has been a game changer for millions of New Yorkers. I asked for $21.25 an hour 2 years ago. Governor Hochul only wanted a $1 increase annually, but it is tied to inflation, and that was a game changer. But I did get to do one bill, actually my freshman year in the state Senate, that corrected a historic wrong, and I'm really, really proud because my bill to grant farm workers their fair labor practices, for their labor rights, has really been about eliminating every vestige of the Jim Crow era in our state. You know, our food used to be picked by black sharecroppers who were denied the right to a day off, the right to overtime pay, the right to organize and join a union. Well, we corrected all of that and then some. So today, 100,000 farm workers in New York State are able to have a day off, get overtime pay, and organize, and are organizing to join a union. But you can look up all of the different worker protections that we've passed, how we've fought wage theft, which is the biggest crime that we don't talk about in New York, to the tune of nearly $3 billion a year that are stolen from women, from immigrants, from people of color. And I want to really be able to expand on that so that I'm not just pitching ideas as a legislator. I really want to have the chance to be able to implement progressive laws and make sure that we have the opportunity to enforce them. It's about protecting working people and providing more opportunity for us, but it's also about leveling the playing field for good employers. That should be the backbone of our economy in New York City. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Our last candidate tonight for mayor is Whitney Tilson, who is about to join us right now. Mr. Tilson, thank you so much for coming tonight. And it's 5 minutes of speech and 10 minutes of questions. Corinne right here has got the sheets, her words law. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Whitney Tilson. I'm running for mayor. If I can summarize what I'm about is my message is if you love this city, are worried that it's headed in the wrong direction, and don't think the career politicians running it are doing a very good job, and are looking for change, I am the only change candidate in the race. I'm the only person who is not a career politician in the Democratic primary. I'm the only person with a business background. I am, however, a hardcore, lifelong Democrat. I have impeccable left-wing credentials, children of parents who were one of the first couples to meet and marry in the Peace Corps. I spent more than half my childhood in Tanzania and Nicaragua. My first job out of college was down here in New York as one of the founders of Teach for America. I've been fighting against the educational inequality in our system for 35 years. I've been on the board of KIPP charter schools for 20 plus years, and I could go on. But I think we Democrats, we need to look in the mirror because our party is screwing up this city. I'm fed up with it, and I am running against my own party, realistically, in this race. I am an outsider, and I am running against my party machine, the party bosses. So forgive me if that offends any of you, but that's where my head is at. And as we look in the mirror, I wish, as a hardcore lifelong Democrat, I could point the finger and say, it's Republicans who are to blame. But I can't, because we're a one-party city, we're a one-party state. So we got to own what's happening here. So voters are voting both in the voting booth and with their feet. So let's talk about the voting booth. Donald fricking Trump has gone from 8 years ago winning 17% of the vote in New York to 4 years ago winning 23% to 30% this last election, the highest level in 36 years in New York City. How is this happening? I don't think it's because anybody likes that guy. And by the way, this is happening nationwide. It's particularly happening here. Nationwide, 90% of U.S. counties shifted toward Donald fricking Trump. And nobody has fought harder against Trump and Trumpism than I have. So the question is why is this happening? And I actually think I've had the pleasure of meeting a couple of the people who were here before, and I mostly don't blame individual politicians. I blame a system in which 5% of New York voters elected our mayor last time. 404,000 votes is what it took to win the primary last time, and that was in a city of 8.8 million people. So I think the problems are structural, and to fix it needs a change agent like myself, who, if I'm elected, I am not going to owe anything to anyone, and will be able to fight every day for what's in the best interest of New Yorkers, as opposed to whatever special interests elected me. So the voters are voting in the voting booth. We can see that, and they're speaking loudly and clearly. They are also voting with their feet. In the past 4.5 years, New York has lost 8% of its population, 707,000 people. And it's not just the pandemic. Of the 70 largest cities in America, there's only one other city that's lost a greater percentage of its population, 10%. Care to guess which one? San Francisco. And San Francisco and New York stand alone in that hall of shame. So that is the fundamental measure of the health of any city or state or country is are people leaving? Are they coming in, or are they fleeing? And 700,000 people left this city. So why is it happening? Number one, they can't pay their rent. We're still, even losing 700,000 people, we have a 1.4% vacancy rate, and even as rents are declining in the rest of the country, they're still going up here. This is on us. We have made it almost impossible to build new middle-class housing in this city. We've taken a good idea, concerns about zoning and gentrification, have led to zoning rules, and taken it to an extreme where there's almost no new construction going on, and where current landlords aren't investing in their housing stock. So we're losing existing housing stock, and new housing isn't being built. Second, so we've got to build a lot more housing. The City of Yes was a small step in the right direction. We need to do 10 times that. Secondly, people are leaving because they don't feel safe. Mayor Adams is out there, I quote, "This is the safest large city in America." It is not. I can prove it. But it was. We were pretty close 5 years ago. After 30-plus years, our murder rate, for example, is down 86%. We have gone in the reverse direction. I can show you the numbers. The 7 major felonies in the last 5 years are up 52% on average. We can see it every day. People, the low-level disorder, but also the serious crimes are all up dramatically, and that's leading people to leave the city. And lastly, our school system spends $40 billion, $43,000 a kid, and half the kids aren't even reading at basic level. Only 3/4 are finishing high school, and half of those who do graduate high school aren't ready to do college-level work. So across the board, our city government is failing to do its job for New Yorkers. And of the 8.1 million New Yorkers, the significant majority of them really, really need the city government to do its job well. Their life depends on it. Their quality of life, literally their life depends on it. And it's not. So I looked at this as a lifelong Democratic activist, concerned citizen, as someone who loves this city, and I said, look, if you think the city's doing great, and you want another career politician to run it, there are plenty of choices. If you're fed up and want change, I'm the only change candidate in the race, so I hope you give me a shot. So thank you. Happy to take your questions.
Yes, hi. Who are the major contributors to your campaign?
I'm sorry, who are the major contributors? I'm from the business world, and so most of my contributors are either people I've gotten to know directly or friends of friends. I've been asking all of my friends to support me, and frankly, it's the most unpleasant part of the job is every one of us has to spend unfortunate amounts of time being beggars. And by the way, I love the city's 8-to-1 matching system. I think that's good governance. It sort of puts us all on a somewhat level playing field. And I would not have entered this race were there not that system. So I applaud it, and I'm trying to get as many New York City residents to support me because people understand an instant 800% return on their investment.
I have 2 questions. One is, what's the largest staff you've ever managed? And 2, did you know that 3 Parks passed a resolution against charter schools, around the city, but particularly in this school district?
To the first question, 30, 40 people. I've built 6 small businesses here in New York over the last 30 years. I've been in the investment field. I've spent my career looking at large broken companies as a value investor and betting on turnarounds, and so I know what that entails. I've seen it work and not work, but you got to start with a change agent who then brings in a great team. Your second question, you all voted against charter schools. Shame on you. I think you were wrong to do so. I have seen, at KIPP, we take 99% low-income minority kids. We are a public school. 97% of our funding is public funding, and we take students by open admission in a demographic of students with a 9% college graduation rate. We deliberately locate our schools in the most low-income areas with the lowest performing public schools, and we give parents an option where their kid has a 60 to 70% chance of graduating college if they go to one of our schools. Next question.
Thanks. Why is crime up, and what would you do to bring it down?
I would say a third of the reason crime is up was the pandemic. The murder rate rose 15% nationwide in 2020. It rose 47% here in New York City. I've studied other cities to see whether it was just the pandemic. It wasn't. I co-chaired Central Synagogue's Criminal Justice Reform Initiative, so I was part of the coalition that pushed for and successfully passed when we flipped the state Senate. 8 pieces of legislation, 6 in the state level, 2 at the city council level, that were designed to reduce inequalities, racial disparities, and in our criminal justice system, and sort of move the pendulum from here to here. The problem is when you're a one-party state, good intentions go awry. They get hijacked by the far left, and the pendulum went to here. The most notable example was bail reform, where we, to this day, are the only state in the country that does not allow judges to consider someone's dangerousness when making a pretrial release decision. But we had a very crude, unfair, unequal bail system that judges weren't supposed to use, but they did to keep dangerous people off our streets after they've been arrested. Always the deal of getting rid of bail, which I fought for, was that you got to give judges dangerousness, like the other 49 states. And in the last minute, then Cuomo said he wasn't going to sign the law unless it had that trade-off. And at the last minute, he got rolled. He signed a piece of legislation he shouldn't, where it passed without giving judges dangerousness. And 100,000 people who would have otherwise been incarcerated just in 2020 when the law went into effect were on our streets as opposed to being incarcerated. And my fellow advocates were cheering this. And I said, wait a second. How many crimes did they commit? How many murders did those people commit? What was the criteria if you don't give judges the discretion to make judgments? That's what judges do. I think there is a direct correlation between a flawed law, well-intentioned, but what passed endangered all of us, and the 47% spike in murders in this city that year. Next question. There was a second part to the question, is how are you going to fix crime? Do you want me to get to that or go to another question? Big picture. Crime, you have to understand that crime is not random. If you read the papers, you think it's random. It's hyper-localized. You break New York City down into 120,000 city blocks, 3% of them account for more than half the crime. These are the communities, first and foremost, we need to invest in, and the city needs to do a better job serving. They tend to have the worst public schools. They don't have after-school programs. There aren't adequate mental health professionals. The streetlights are broken. The housing projects aren't run properly. The parks are a mess, etc. So the city needs to do a much better job of serving the communities. They're being most poorly served by the city. So there's a big investment program that I would implement to invest and better serve these communities and address the root causes. But secondly, it's a law enforcement question. Right now, today, we are at a 35-year low in the number of police officers in this city. We've gone from 36,000 down to 33,000. Do I think there's a correlation between that and a 52% spike in serious crimes in this city over the last 5 years? Absolutely. And so I would like to bring the number of police officers back to where it was 5 years ago when we were one of the safest large cities in America. And then every police officer I talk to says it used to be that when we caught people who are out there committing mayhem and endangering us and ruining our quality of life, that there were consequences. After these 8 pieces of legislation passed, I mentioned bail reform, it's become a revolving door where we, again, well-intentioned, you don't want to put people in Rikers for stealing a bottle of shampoo, but when taken to extremes and there are no consequences for habitual, chronic, even low-level offenses, that revolving door has created plexiglass. Everything's behind plexiglass in every drugstore in the city. So it went too far. So I'm going to advocate as mayor, I'm going to have to spend time with the governor and the state legislature and the city council, not to repeal, but to fix some of the legislation that went too far. Next question. Oh, is it time up? I think we're at time. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So just before you leave, we have 2 quick things. Councilmember Gail Brewer is here, and she just wanted to say hello and say a few moments. And then we also have State Committee Woman Lynn Thomas, who has a quick report. Councilmember.
Very quick, you want to go home. I have some super local issues. Barzini's. So this is a wonderful store on 91st Street, but a few weeks ago somebody called, they saw rats, mice, beetles, rotten cheese, salmon that was outdated, etc. Agriculture Market State Agency came in and they found 12 pages. If you read it, you get sick. And so now, as we speak, it's ostensibly closed, supposedly, but Ag and Markets, interestingly enough, does not have any way of closing. So they're now in court trying to get it closed through the police department. I don't want it permanently closed because I am tired of people. I've got emails on both sides. We love Barzini's. We don't care about the rats. I like Barzini's, but I do care about the rats. So long story short, we're trying to get them cleaned up, etc., in case you run by and you want to know what's going on. Number 2, I just want to mention congestion pricing because I'm supportive. But the City Department of Transportation is doing an 18-month by law survey of what is going on in terms of residential. Do we need it or not parking? Where is there issues in East Harlem, Long Island City, etc. So just be aware that, and when we asked them the other day, they're going to give us incremental reports on how this study is going. So I just want to be sure. And that MTA should tell us exactly where the money is going. That would be very nice. On affordable housing, I just want to say there's a whole lot of discussion. But as the migrants leave, and I am very, very supportive of them, I just feel very strongly about keeping them. We could have another conversation. There are vacant buildings, and the city should turn them over to, particularly for seniors, because many of them are single-room occupancies and would be a perfect for senior citizens. There are 2 right now that are going to go to seniors based on my suggestion, but there are others that are also going to be vacant. So when people talk about affordable housing, Mr. Mayor, put your damn mouth where your money is and buy some of these with the nonprofit sector so that seniors can live in them. On mental health, I'm so tired of this topic. Because Dr. Katz, who's head of health and hospitals, I have great respect for him. This is what he said should be done. When I went out the other night with both social workers and emergency mental services, something called Be Heard, there are so few places to put people once you take them off the street. And a suggestion is 1 in East Harlem, only 11 beds for men, 3 for women, 24-hour psychiatric care, 24-hour nursing, and 24-hour occupational support. That's what's needed, occupational training. That's what's needed, small places, 30 beds and under, around the city, perhaps housed with a safe haven. It has to be small, it has to have services, and it has to have support. So I just want to say, when people talk about this, again, put your money where your mouth is and make this opportunity available for people on the streets. I just also want to mention the issue of something in terms of people stealing in stores. There's something now called, and you probably know this, the lawyers in the room, a trespass affidavit. So that, in the past, you took toothpaste, as you heard earlier, it wasn't such a problem, but people are loading up entire shopping carts. But the stores have to get with it and get this transportation affidavit. If you aren't doing it at the local store and they're complaining, then they can even take a smaller amount to make it count in terms of the district attorney's office. Finally, I just want to mention that today, as you heard from Scott Stringer, we were both with a lot of migrants at St. Mark's Church, which was phenomenal. All the churches, all the synagogues are supporting these amazing individuals. I think many of you are involved. But this one was particularly special. I just signed up to be a mentor because if you're not 21 and when you're 21, you can be picked up according to the way in which ICE works with no documentation. Let's hope it doesn't happen here. So I signed up to be a mentor for a young man. I'd never met him before, but I met him tonight. I'm going to his lawyer's office tomorrow. I'm going to sign up to be a mentor because he's not 21 until February 6th, which means that I could, as being a mentor, stop him from getting deported. I have no idea what the hell this law is, but I'm more than willing to sign up, and others should try to do the same. Thank you very much.
60 more seconds. We have our State Committee woman, Lynn Thomas, as a very quick report. And while she's coming to the stage, if you like what you hear tonight, we're going to be back here next month with on the 12th of February. We have candidates for for Comptroller and Manhattan Borough President. And if you like what you also hear, sign up, join us. It's very cheap. Room in the back. Lynn.
I just want to report a bit on something that's going on in the Board of Elections. The executive director has been in trouble lately, and just so you know, certain things work. It was a Hispanic woman who was working in the legal department who was very, very upset about the kinds of things that he said and sort of sexual harassment she felt, and then also racial things. She was Hispanic, and then just recently there was another thing having to do with LGBTG things that he said, that this is Michael Ryan. So the thing is, he's been very insensitive, and it surprised me. I've known him for maybe 10 years, and he is one of the reasonable people of the four who are in charge. But I think he's in real trouble, and he should be. The commissioners, there are 2 from every borough, a Democrat and a Republican, decided that he should just be punished by taking away 3 weeks of his pay, and then they had to do sensitivity training. And what I forgot to mention was the Department of Investigation did a big thing for 2 months, and they suggested that he be fired. So it's on the one hand and then the other hand, it's a problem because there are inadequate people in the other positions, but it is not the way that an agency head should act at all. So it's very likely he will be fired. So just wanted to let you know that. Thank you.
Come back on the 12th. Thank Teresa, thank Dan, thank all of you for coming. This was a dynamite evening, and I hope you think so.
Don't forget to sign in, members on my left, guests on the right, if you haven't already. Thank you.